Hello and welcome to our fifth video on angles. Before we start today's lesson, I think it's really useful that you go and watch our videos on measuring angles before you go and do that one. But if you have done that and you're confident with measuring angles, here is your first task. What I would like you to do is draw two lines that intersect. Measure all the angles around the intersection and tell me what you notice. Go ahead, pause the video and have a go at that. Okay, so to help you out, here's a diagram that I've done. I've measured all of the angles around it and I just double checked that they were all correct because angles around a point or in a full turn add to 360, and I've checked that all of these numbers add to 360. What do you notice about the measurements of my angles? What can you tell me? Well, what you should have noticed is I've got a pair of 70s, so I've got two angles which are 70 and I've got two angles which are 110. And that's because of this amazing angle fact that we have, is when we have two straight lines that cross, two straight lines that intersect at a point, the opposite angles are going to be equal. So here we are, we can see that 110 and 110, they're opposite and they're equal, and I've got 70 and 70 and they're opposite and they're equal. And we can see this in this diagram. So here's my straight lines that intersect, and I can see that the pink angles are going to be equal and the purple angles are going to be equal, and I can use that through letters as well. I can say, well, A and C are equal and B and D are equal. Now have a look at this diagram. What could we do to help us figure out which angles are equal in this diagram? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the angles that are equal, and I'm going to add some letters to make it easier. Now with some letters given and you can see which angles are equal, what can you tell me about this diagram? What can you tell me about this diagram? Well, what you should have said is that C and E are equal, E and C are equal, and A plus B, so A and B added together, are equal to D, and we can see that. In this diagram, we can see that they are equal. What about this one? What can you tell me about this diagram? Well, in this one, A and D are equal, and then B plus C will equal to E. And that's what we can see from this diagram. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at some diagrams now and decide whether A and B are opposite. And if they are opposite, then we're going to say that they are equal, because we know from our angle fact that if we have two straight lines that intersect at one point, the opposite angles will be equal. So the first thing we need to decide is whether they are opposite, and then we need to decide whether they're equal. So let's have a look at this first one. We have two straight lines that intersect at one point. Therefore, the opposite angles must be equal. So A and B are opposite, and they are also equal. What about this one? Well, with this one, we can see we have two straight lines that intersect at one point, that cross at one point. However, A and B are on the same side of one of the lines. They are not opposite each other, so they can't be equal. A and B are on this straight line. So because they're on a straight line, they must sum to 180. What about this diagram? Well, for this one, we can see that I've got two straight lines. I've got them touching, but the issue is they're not intersecting at one point. I have two separate points. Because I have 2 points and I've got the angles that are created by these two separate straight lines, I've technically got 4 lines here. They're not opposite. They may be the same size if we measured them, but we can't say they are opposite and equal. That is not a statement we can make because they're not. What about this one? Now, slightly different to the previous question, they do share a straight line. They do share a straight line. However, because we've got these 2 extra lines, so altogether we've got 3 lines, it's not 2 lines intersecting at one point. So A and B are not opposite, and therefore we cannot say they are equal. If we measured them, they might turn out to be equal, but we can't say that through our angle fact, that they are actually equal. What about this one? Well, we can see that they share one straight line. However, we have 2 extra lines there. This isn't one line that goes through one point. These are 2 extra lines that go through the one point. So these lines would mean that A and B are not opposite and they are not equal. We can also visually see that they are not equal. So that's opposite angles. That's the angle rule that you need to understand and do. Now the best thing to do is to go off and try some questions. So I suggest going and watching Mr. Amison's video to practice some questions. If you're super confident and you think you can do this, then go on Dr. Frost and Corbett Maths and just practice doing some questions in your own time. Hopefully this has been helpful. Go off and be productive, and I'll see you in the next video.